You're welcome to the Policy Council. My name is Okweme Agbaje. Most Nigerians don't understand our history, and worse still, our economic history. Most Nigerians cannot account for how our political economy has evolved, what accounts for where we are today. On the Policy Council, we try for the next 2 weeks to remedy this gap. I have an expert on the topic to trace the evolution of Nigerian political economy with me. Enjoy the program. You're welcome back. It's the Policy Council with Okweme Agbaje, and my guest is a reputable political economist. It's Professor Deni Ologbenla. He's of the Department of Political Science, University of Lagos. You're welcome to the program.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Let's start by having an overview. How do you track how Nigeria's political economy has evolved over the period of independence? And what are the highlights for you?
Well, thank you very much. The first thing we have to remember is that Nigerian economy was established largely by the British, and they made it an appendage of the British economic system, which is capitalist in type. And from the word go, they laid the foundation of a dependent economy. Thus, they emphasize agriculture, produce, that
to feed British factories.
Feed British factories and people. Emphasis was on cocoa, granules, cotton, rubber, palm oil, palm kernel, all to be exported to Britain. Then we had coal, discovered at Huli near Enugu, when we have tin and bauxite from the Jos Plateau. All these were also directed towards Britain.
British industry.
Then we discovered oil in 58, and from then to now, the British have been heavily involved in our oil production, now gas production, and so on and so forth. That's how the economic foundation was laid. And at independence, we inherited all this, along with the political freedom or sovereignty. With that, we also, the Tafawa Balewa government, tried to stay within the British sphere of influence. That is to continue along capitalist lines. Late Chief Obafemi Awolowo and others tried to emphasize that the British and the foreigners present in Nigeria should not be allowed to have everything, and thus there should be areas where Nigerian petty bourgeoisie or the bourgeoisie or the ordinary businessmen and women could actually have a niche for themselves. And that was the general background. And thus, between 60 and 1966, the economy was relatively buoyant in the sense that there were good prices for cocoa, there were good prices for palm oil and rubber and so on and so forth. But the judicious use of the income was the contention between the opposition, which was the Action Group, and the NPC,
the NCNC,
yes, NCNC alliance or coalition at that time. But unfortunately for the political class, they could not settle their differences, and this degenerated into a situation of political crisis that resulted in the first coup, January coup 66, by the young majors. The young majors meant well, so they thought. But unfortunately, the coup did not succeed. There was a counter coup, or a move by the Nigerian army senior members. Who,
the conservative wing of the Nigerian army.
They frustrated the young people and put them in the cooler. Ifejuna, Undubusi, Adegboyega, and Uzegu, and others. They put them in the cooler and hand over the baton to the most senior army man, who was Aguiyi Ironsi. Aguiyi Ironsi, unfortunately, did not know how to use the political power he had and before he can gather himself enough together, it was overthrown by a massive force from the Middle Belt. And that
from the Middle Belt on the surface,
largely from the Middle Belt,
but with strong support from the core north.
Of course, the core north were involved, but you know, as of that time, the Middle Belt are very large
within the army,
in the lower ranks. Then the officer ranks were Igbo, Yoruba, and some Connaughts.
Yeah.
So that was what happened. The taking over of the July coup was a bloody coup, in the sense that it removed the high-ranking Igbo officers from the army. Some Yorubas went along, also were killed, and the consequence is that the Hausa Fulani oligarchy, backed by the what we call the Middle Belt, took over the Nigerian army.
And of course, I like this fascinating conversation.
Yes.
We'll continue it right after this time out. You're welcome back. It's the Policy Council, and Professor Daniel Ologbenla of the University of Lagos was telling us a fascinating story of how Nigeria's political economy has evolved. Please resume your...
Well, the taking over by the army more or less put all the politicians out of business for the while. And the consequence of that is that Nigeria undergo created 12 states out of the 4. That was 4 regions. And
that was the beginning of this splintering of Nigerian federalism.
into creating more states. And that move was supported by AWO, was supported by many people, because everybody was clamoring for states creation for their own area, and it was welcomed. But what it meant also was that the economy of Nigeria was now being highly demanded upon by the new states, because some of them were not economically viable. But yet you have to give them subvention, either monthly or quarterly or annually, and so on and so forth.
And that creation of state, maybe not yet at that point, but we began to see a shift of power and resources to the federal level.
Yes.
A reversal of the concept behind our federal.
Yes, it's because of the nature of the army structure. Once they took over the reign of power and suspended the constitution, they bring in the hierarchical structure of the army into running the nation. That is, the head of the armed forces, who is also the head of state, now created military administrators to go and run
a military posting.
Yes, to go and run the state on behalf of himself and the Supreme Military Council. And thus, the responsibility of the MA, the military administrators, is directly to the head of state, not to the people.
Not to the people.
Not to the citizens. So they are posted there, they do their bits, the best of their ability, and they are reposted back into the armed forces, or retired, as the case may be, or reposted to another
political appointment.
Yes. So the army then run the show for a long time, from 66 to 1979. That is a long time of military rulership. And the result of that was that during this period, the economy did not develop much, because the military spent most of the money doing white elephant projects, projects that did not yield money for its own sustenance. But we had the luck of the oil boom. The 73 war between the Arabs and the Israelis gave a boost to the prices of oil throughout the world, because the Arabs switched off the tap, and Nigeria had an opportunity to produce more and to sell more. So we had lot of money.
How did we use that opportunity? Bearing in mind, because I have always had this theory that the conjunction of oil,
Yes.
which we didn't work for,
Yes.
and military rule, which was not accountable, and remember at that time, powerful civil servants,
Yes.
all of which were not accountable to the people. That conjunction always meant that we were going to misuse the oil boom.
Yes, we are going to misuse the oil boom, but don't forget, we have had 3 years of civil war. That management. Chief Obafemi Awolowo, in conjunction with the Supreme Military Council, managed a tight budget. They did not borrow money to fight the war, and after the war, they did not owe anybody practically, and therefore the windfall of petrodollar that came in the early 70s actually gave them plenty of money, which they tried. I must be honest. Gowon and his cabinet tried. Foundation of many road network was laid by Gowon. Foundation of many other things like institutions were also laid by Gowon. The universities were expanded.
Structures,
the polytechnics were expanded. So, you know, it was well distributed. But nevertheless, it could have been better used. Let me give you an example. We produce oil, but the oil is being drilled by these multinationals. And when we want to sell our oil, we put it in their large tankers, ocean-going tankers, to go and sell in the world market.
Behalf.
It was during the time we had money. We should have bought our own big.
So we didn't establish linkages between the oil industry
and the rest of the economy. The backward linkages was missing.
Let's take a short break, and I'll be right back with Professor Ologbenla. We're having a fascinating discussion. It's the Policy Council.
My name is Laide Awoyemi. I dey live for Lagos. You see as our new Lagos just defined the good. Good thing good though. To go market now, no hard at all. Just pay. Sit down inside BRT bus. Small time, you don't reach where they go. Hospital nko, the full ground. And for me and my pikin where I just born, treatment now free. You look left, you look right. Them they build new roads, new hospitals, new schools, new things everywhere. Everywhere they shine, gone. We thank God though. But come on, I hear saying that this tax money wey they pay, and then they use to do all these good things. Me I they pay my own tax too. Say they pay your own.
Pay your tax. It's your civic responsibility. It's your duty. It's the law.
You're welcome back to the Policy Council. Okwemi Agbaje is my name, and my guest is Professor Darian Ologbenla of the University of Lagos. He's a political economist and is of the Department of Political Science. So yes, sir, we skipped the Civil War in terms of its consequences, in terms of political power, in terms of the federal system, in terms of the future of Nigeria. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, you know, the Civil War was a mistake on the part of Ojukwu, and also on the part of the Federal Republic of under Gowon, in the sense that an attempt was made at Aburi to settle the differences and to reconcile the two parties, that is the Biafran part and the federal government. Unfortunately, when Gowon returned from Aburi and showed the agreed, yes, to the top civil servants, and most of them are still alive, or some of them are still alive today.
Certainly.
They said, how are we going to find money to pay for all these demands of the Biafrans?
The compensation,
so, compensation to all the people that died,
were killed in 67.
all the people that have been displaced, the return of these people to their jobs.
Yes.
With adequate compensation, and so on and so forth. And also the return of their properties. The Igbo said, on Aburi we stand. The federal government relinked. And from there, the war was almost inevitable. And the civil war itself was fought on Igbo land, was fought in eastern Nigeria, largely. And the consequence was terrible for the Igbos, because the creation of the in 1967 of the 12 states cut the Igbo off from the sea and from the oil wells, and they were now squeezed and surrounded in the middle of the landlocked Igbo land, and the end was just a matter of time, militarily. The consequence of the civil war was actually determined by the experience of the Igbos in the pogrom that was carried out in the north in 1966-67. That is, Igbo military officers were killed in the army. Well, that's the army fighting between themselves. But when this was extended to the civilian population and massacre of Igbos from the north, the Igbos for the first time had massive emigration back to their homeland.
Those were crimes against humanity.
They were largely crimes against humanity now. But then it was genocide. You know, Chukwumerije, Ojukwu, and all of them were talking about genocide. The genocide of the Igbo, the genocide of the Igbo. But it was something that happened between brothers. We, the Federal Republic side, and they, the Biafran side. And that is why, after the war, Gowon put in a policy of no victor, no vanquish. That the East must be rehabilitated. We are brothers. Let's forget what has happened and get on. But the Igbos were kept out of the Nigerian politics from that period until 1979.
When Dr. Alex
Ekweme came back, and they also got a pardon for the Nkemba of Unewu, late Odumegwu Ojukwu. That was the beginning of the reintegration of the Igbos back into the Nigerian body politics. Most Igbos went into business. They left Nigeria for the north and for the Yorubas and other minorities. But now, looking at it, they are fully back. They are fully back. They are fully back in business, in politics, in culture, governance, and so on. And so on.
Let's shift to economics. We trace the politics up to 1979. And then 79, Shagari went out of power. We had the military return with Buhari and then Babangida. Let me skip to Babangida. What's your assessment of Babangida's era in Nigerian politics?
Well, Babangida was a purposeful leader. He had planned for many years of wanting to be head of state. So he was not an accidental leader.
Unlike his predecessors. Take
for example, Tafawa Balewa was just lucky.
Number 2.
Was lucky. The Gamji, Sir Amadu Bello, did not want to come to Lagos. He sent his deputy. He was lucky. Uronsi was lucky. Gowon was lucky.
Murtala did
a coup, but he was not so lucky in the sense that he got killed within a few 6 months or so. Babangida planned to rule, and when he came to power, he had opportunities to utilize the brain of the intellectuals. He said that the ruler does not have to be the most brilliant person, but he can assemble people around him that will give him the glory.
And he did assemble a first-class team.
He did.
Professor
Oyobare, Oyobare, Omomoruyi, Adeleji Nadu, all sorts of people. My humble self were involved at a lower level, running Lagos State NLC and so on and so forth.
I remember
for a while. So it was a kind of opening up of the intellectual capacity of this country to opportunities, and people perform. People like Professor Omomoruyi and Ofriwosu, we brought out the Option A4, which broke these malpractices in voting by making an open ballot system.
Professor, let's take a short time out and then we'll continue with the Babangida impact on Nigeria. We'll be right back.
Who knows Abi better thing? Abi who no like better thing? All these fine things wey dey see so. Now money government they take do am now. Abi, I think it's like, excuse me, I dey pay my tax. I dey do a thing, I dey pay my tax. Say you don't pay your own tax. If you pay your tax, I pay oh.
Pay your tax. It's your civic responsibility. It's your duty. It's the law.
You're welcome back to the Policy Council, and you can't believe it, we're having a fascinating discussion on the evolution of Nigerian political economy. And my guest is Professor Daniel Ologbenla of the University of Lagos. So we were talking about Babangida and the absorption of the intellectuals into the system.
Yes.
But there were downsides. What were those downsides?
Well, the downsides really was SAP, the Structural Adjustment Program. That was one of the biggest, I would say, mistake of his own administration, because the devaluation of the naira, we have never recovered from that. And also, it was anti-people policy. Food prices went up. So many things went wrong. But, Babangida was no political economist or economist. He was persuaded by great economists like Kalu, Idika Kalu, Okongo,
Chief Olufalaye, Professor Ojedunde Aboyade.
We have to mention them. But he is the head and the responsibility was his. But unfortunately, the economy did not work out.
To be fair, sir,
yes,
there were positives to SAP. The banking deregulation, the banking
liberalization, the
privatization of the first bank of this world, and so on.
No, I was going to mention that in the sense that he had a vision that something must change from where we used to do things to new things. So we got a reform in the banking sector, which affect the economy positively, okay? But the devalue of the currency affected everybody negatively. Then the second watershed was that Babangida had a program of returning to the civilian rule.
And June 12th.
And he allowed many people to come out, disqualified them, frustrated them. Finally, June 12th came. Between Tofa and late Masood Abiola, and we all believed that this was a great stage, a great renaissance for the Nigerians, because Abiola was winning everywhere, because he had a good platform. He had a good platform, good background. He have done so much to influence people
in terms of charity.
And yes, charity, contribution, philanthropy, and so on, and it paid off. Unfortunately, it was annulled, and the annulment of June 12th sent all the intellectual packing because we all ran back to the university and face our work and forget about adventure.
If MKO had, and if Babangida had handed over to MKO Abiola.
Yes, we believe that Nigeria would
have forgiven him.
Nigerians would have remembered him forever.
For good.
And as it is now, they still remember him, but not always for good. But he did his best. The annulment of June 12th is best known to him and the Supreme Military Council.
There are those who argue that he was forced by people like General Abacha and even some individuals who are still prominent in Nigeria.
Well, until Babangida himself speaks to us about this matter, I think it's better we just don't accept the conspiracy theories and rumors and innuendos. The man had a responsibility and he decided.
We'll be right back.